Okay, David, tell us about multiculturalism.
Well, I suppose lesson 7 that's the career is I'm increasingly conscious of the fact that there's a novel by Hugo Hamilton, who's an Irish writer, called The Speckled People. And it involves someone who grew up in Ireland in the 1950s, and I grew up in the 70s, late 60s, and his mother was German, and his father was Irish, and a Gaeilgeoir, that means he only spoke Irish. And he insisted his son did not speak English at school. The result was the son was bullied like crazy. Now, the father was a nice guy, but I grew up in Ireland, half Austrian and half Irish, increasingly conscious of this as I grew older. I was in a debating competition. I, in reality, won, and not for the first time. The bollocks has ganged up on me. And one idiot said, when I was giving something, he offered him what's called a point of information, and he said, "Nine Danke, Herr Langwallner." And that gives you some indication of how you always are regarded if you're of mixed race in a small community. And Ireland is intrinsically racist. At whatever levels of tolerance there were among the whole bourgeoisie of Ireland 20 or 30 years ago are not there now. And the measures of protection of people are not there now. So one of the things I found when I set up the Innocence Project and kind of got projected back into public attention, I mean, I was always an academic and teacher, and so the legal community knew me and so on. But once you do something that gets mass attention, everyone goes, "Well, who is this foreigner?" Forgetting the fact, of course, I was brought up in Ireland. But it does make you acutely conscious that you're mixed race. Now, and then if you add to that the kind of odd nature of my Austrian background, I've never quite worked out. And if you add to all of that one of my relatives on my mother's side was a Welsh, you begin to think of yourself as a mongrel. Now, mongrels are often the best people because they have to survive, to be accommodating and tolerant. And there isn't a bone of racism in me for a variety of reasons. I mean, quite apart from that, I went to Trinity College, which was always a reasonably tolerant place. I did a lot of debating, so I travelled a lot. I went to London, to the London School of Economics, and got submerged into an international environment. And you don't get more, in a way, oddly international than the Harvard Law School. So any measure of racism that I may have had by conditioning in Ireland has been expurgated from me, and I don't have any. And I'm colourblind, class blind, sex blind, largely speaking. Now, that increasingly makes you very odd in Ireland, as the things we've spoken about, the triumph of the extreme right and racist fascism and so on. And in an odd sort of way, I mean, if you look at our Prime Minister, Mr. Varadkar, whose father is Indian, he is, like put up as the totemic person who's overcome racism, but only by becoming a fascist. Of course, the fascists don't mind someone of mixed race who's a fascist, because he's one of us. But if you're someone of mixed race like me, who's a liberal, left with a small t, then you're demonized, public enemy number one, because the discourse has been shaped in certain ways. That said, multiculturalism aside, so laying my cards on the table, I wrote about this, the limits of multiculturalism. You begin to see how the international experiment of internationalization and multiculturalism has turned into a total nightmare. And one of the reasons is the left believes wrongly in saw it in Barbara Roach, who was a minister in Blair's government, that allow everybody in. Well, no, you don't allow everybody in. And you have to make at one level a judgment call about who gets in and what terms. Mass migration has created phenomena like ghettoization, cultural isolation, and that has led to, at one level, extremism and jihadism and the self-selection of extremists of their own company, which has created all sorts of social order problems. And also, it has led to the state being more authoritarian because they've had an excuse that there are terrorists in our midst. So they've been able to utilize laws, both in Britain and elsewhere, to crack down on terrorism, which have undermined civil liberties, which have been caused by an open doors policy in the first place. The other point about internationalization, mass migration, is it suits the agenda of neoliberalism. If you have Nike boots made in China or Chinese workers coming over, I'm not picking any race or any particular criteria, but if you're recruiting people from a low-wage economy to a moderate, high-wage economy, then it suits the interests of organized capitalism to have people work longer for cheaper. This diminishes both the quality of life of indigenous citizens and it diminishes everybody's quality of life. And it is a kind of Americanization and a form of bastardized capitalism, which is a return to a darker age of the end of the 19th century. And I've written about this as well. There's a fantastic book, because I do think we're reverting in time to the 1930s, by Oswald Spengler. And it's called, sorry, not by, we'll get to Spengler in a second, by Upton Sinclair. And it's called The Jungle, and it's the conditions in the Chicago meat industry in the 1930s. And that's what multiculturalism and neoliberalism has led to. Mass migration, lower wages, longer working hours. And to some extent, the left's flagship principle of to be regulatory of racism or of immigration is to be racist is total bullshit. The other point about it is, of course, if you flip the argument, there is no doubt that they've given the right the opportunity to play the race card. And this has led to the rise of fascism and xenophobia all throughout Europe. It's also led, again, a reversion to the 1930s, and this I'm absolutely convinced about, to this. There's an infamous text which influenced Hitler called Oswald Spengler's Decline of the West. And it's about the typification of races as degenerate races, particularly Slavic races, and those that are non-Aryan. Now this stuff, of course, ultimately ends up in the Holocaust at one level, and it's coming right back everywhere. The disapproval of casual lifestyles, the disapproval of Mongols, the disapproval of mixed race people, the notion that quality is coextensive with Aryan qualities or Anglo-Saxon qualities. Now, nothing against Anglo-Saxons, all in favour of it at certain levels. A lot against this whole typification of people in terms of background and race that's creeping in all over the place. The other question is that the whole notion of multiculturalism has also led to certain very disturbing tendencies in terms of academia. So, for example, if you criticize someone, you're racist. And you see there's a terrible thing going on with the transgender lobby in particular, trying to get younger people and children in touch with their transgender side. And I think this has been orchestrated, manipulated. And Gemma O'Doherty, who's a journalist in Dublin, who herself ran a presidential campaign tinged with an element of racism, it must be said. But she's been quite interesting about how an agenda is going on in the schools and the workplaces of getting children to be confused about their sexual identity in terms of transgenderism and homosexuality. Now, what is that leading to? I've nothing against someone who's gay or transgender, but not many people necessarily are. It's leading to creating dysfunctional human beings in adulthood who will be concerned less about politics and engagement, as Camus would put it, and involvement in the body politics and NGOs, and more focusing on getting in touch with myself. And this, I think, suits the agenda of neoliberalism as well, because lifestyle choices, everybody's not a racist, everybody's not a sexist, everybody should be tolerant, not always, and not of mechanisms of social control, and not when affirmative action, to use the American expression, creates a drop in standards. And therefore, I think what we have to do is look at people in a blank canvas in a way, and what they have and haven't to offer. I have certain skill sets, for example. Orally, immodestly, I'm one of the best communicators in business, and I can justify that at all sorts of different levels. I write good polemics. I'm a good communicator, good teacher, good barrister. Sometimes, because I've got a typographical thing going on, slightly mildly on Asperger's, my punctuation is erratic. So you wouldn't want me necessarily to be a bureaucrat if you just take me as a case in point. Now, so you could have someone who is of another nationality, but has a tremendous warm personality. Well, obviously someone like that is someone who would be very engaging and good with clients and be able to get the work. What I'm saying is, we look at people as people in isolation, give them in isolation questions of achievements and quality of life, but we don't give in to the soppy multiculturalism, whilst equally understanding that the right of taking the argument of multiculturalism to create a new era of xenophobia and racism. And the other point about this is it's everywhere. So, for example, everybody's demonizing everybody. The Poles are demonizing their migrants, the Hungarians, their migrants. When they come over here, they're demonized here. This whole thing has led to something I'll go on to in the next session, an age of extremes.